Hi there, I'm Mike from Golioth, and I wanted to share one of the things I'm excited about with this week's release of the Golioth firmware SDK, and that is the addition of TLS tag authentication type. And so what that means is for a device like the nRF9160, which is a board that I have right here, that has a secure key store in it, you can put your credentials in the secure part of the board, and then if someone gets a hold of the board, they can't read those out again. But at the same time, once they're stored in there, the Golioth SDK is able to use those to authenticate with Golioth Cloud, which I think is pretty neat. We'll look at two parts of this. The first one will use pre-shared keys, PSKs, and then the second one will generate some credentials and then use credential authentication. So we're going to look at both of those. Before we even jump into the Golioth firmware SDK, though, we actually want to go and create a device representation in order to get our credentials. This will only be for the first part. For the second part, you don't need to create the device ahead of time. It'll be created when the certificate is authenticated with the server. So we'll see that. So I've just created a device with a random name. We have a PSK ID and a PSK. I'm going to use the Nordic nRF Connect for desktop tools. We used to use the LTE monitor for this. We'll use the cellular monitor for this, and it is a tool that's going to allow us to work with certificates in the key store. I'll select my device, and I'll make sure to open up a serial terminal so we can see what's going on. In this certificate manager tab, they have instructions on how to do this, and so I have a board with nothing on it, so I'm going to need to put something on it. In the Nordic SDK under sample cellular AT client, we can build the AT client that would look something like, let's see, something like this command, but I've already done it, so we don't need to do it. And we'll do a flash. And so this is just going to enable the AT client library. You can enable that on your own apps. You're probably also going to need to enable like a big buffer for the terminal as well. This has it all done for us. And so I can take this command here, and that tells it to disconnect the modem or disable the modem. And then I can take this command right here, and that will list out what credentials we have in the key store so far. Now these credentials, this is a special number for Nordic's certificate credentials. I don't know what this other set is for, but they're for something. And then these numbers 0, 1, 2, and 10, 11 are the credential types. So 0, 1, and 2 are certificate credentials. We're going to be starting with these pre-shared key and PSK identity credentials. And let's just start with the number 12 because you got to pick a number, and that's the number I picked. If I go back to Golioth, this is my device page. I can go to credentials and copy these out, and this is the ID. Now this took me a while to figure out. So you actually need to take the PSK and format it in a hex string. And so I have some cheat notes here. Shout out to Jared Wolf for teaching me how to do this. And XXD is your friend, does a lot of cool tricks. Let me get my PSK and put it in here. And there's the PSK that I'm going to store at the beginning. All right. All right, so pre-shared key and PSK KID, security tag 12. I'm going to update the certificates, and we see an OK after both of these. So we should be good there. Now you'll notice here's my number 12 right here. We're going to need to give that to Golioth. And so probably the easiest app to do this on is the Hello app. So I'm just going to jump back into the Hello sample. So from the Golioth firmware SDK, I go to examples, then I go to Zephyr and Hello. And the first thing that we're going to do is go into the prj.conf. And again, go to my cheat sheet for a couple of keys that we're going to need, or sorry, a couple of symbols that we're going to need, kconfig symbols. So we have auth type tag, and we have credentials tag. We're going to set the credential tag to 12 because that's what we just used right there on the security tag when we wrote it. And then going to go into main, and let's see. So main's going to actually do this for us. I could leave this exactly the way it is, and this uses like the common library, but I think it might be a little bit more interesting if we actually use the client config that Golioth has. One place that I know it is, because I just worked on this, is the migration guide. And so the migration guide for Zephyr talks about all three of these different authentication types. So PKI, which is certificates, PSK, which is pre-shared key, and then here's our tag authentication. So let me grab that, and I'm going to replace that line. And what this is doing is it's saying, okay, let's actually use the tag authentication, and let's use this tag right here. Now we know that tag is 12, but to make this a little bit easier in the next round, I'm going to use that kconfig symbol right here. So this would get used automatically by the helper library that we're actually replacing, but I'm just going to show you what that looks like. All right, so there's the tag, and then this needs to be the address of the client, and I think that is correct. There's one more place. So under the boards directory, there is a configuration file for the nRF9160 DK, and we've changed the TLS priority in order to not use the offloaded sockets. But for this demo, we definitely want to use the offloaded sockets. So I'm just going to comment that out, and let's try the build command again for this. It's going to go ahead and build. And while we're waiting for this to build, some of the cool things to think about with this are the ability to store multiple credentials on one device. If you wanted the ability to have credential rotation, you could, in advance, incompatible type. What did I do wrong? Did I not save the main changes to main? I did not save the changes to main. What about the changes to... I did not save these either. All right, well, that'll do it. As I was saying, you have the ability to store multiple credentials on the board in that secure key store. So if you wanted, for one reason or another, to store multiple credentials, you could do that, and then you could decide at runtime when you create the Golioth client which key you want to use on that, which is pretty neat. I don't necessarily have a great use case as an example right now, so if you do, let us know in the forums or email devrel@golioth.io. We have finished compiling, and let's flash the board now. It's going to erase those blocks first, and then it'll flash it and then verify it. And if we go back to our device, we get this Golioth device is never connected. So we haven't seen it connect yet because it has not started running, but now it should be running. If I go back to my serial terminal, we see it coming up here. It has a connection to the cell network, and now it has connected to Golioth. So now we should see connection information. Yay! We just used our PSK authentication. So that's pretty cool. All right, so let's go ahead and try out the certificate authentication. So first thing I'm going to do is erase the board so that it's not currently connecting. And I'm just going to go and delete this device so that we know that it's not connecting. If I delete the device, we know it's not connecting through PSK because the PSK no longer exists. And I just want to make sure there's no certificates in there. I'm going to remove the build directory, and then let's make a few changes. So let's say we're going to use tag number 24 for our next tag. And then go back to my cheat sheet here. I'm going to get the symbol to use certificates. So oops, let's not do that. What's in my clipboard? Hang on. All right, so by default, the PSK authentication is selected, but we can use this symbol right here to turn on certificate authentication. We again have the auth type of tag, and then we have a tag ID of 24. We actually don't need to change anything in main because, again, it's just pulling in this tag number. So this doesn't need to know whether it's certificate or PSK. We tell that we tell Golioth what to expect with this symbol right here, either this method cert or method PSK, and then it will use that in order to check the type from the key store. So what we don't have right now is any kind of, I do have a bunch of credentials in here from a previous run. So let's just look at that. All right, so we don't have credentials in here. How do we make certificate authentication credentials? So let's go to the firmware tab under Golioth Firmware SDK and hit up device authentication. And there is a certificate authentication tab in there that will run us through it. So I'm just going to start off with this whole thing. I guess I can click here, which we should be good to run that whole thing. And then that will have generated Golioth.crt.pem and Golioth.key.pem. So keep the key to yourself. That's the secret part. But we're going to go ahead and under our project and project settings, we are going to go to certificates, and we're going to add a certificate and upload the crt.pem that we just created. And let's add that, and then we'll go back and create the device certificates now. There's a few things at the top that you need to take care of. So the first is your project slug, which you can also find on this project settings page under summary. That's the ID right here. So I'm going to grab that ID. And then the next part, I believe, is device name. So a unique device name is needed, and I'm going to call this nRF91 and cert. All right, and then we already set the server name. I'm going to use this client name here as the last thing we need to do before running. We don't need to run this because we don't need DER format is going to be needed if you store the certificate at compile time, or if you're putting it on a file system using MCU manager. But in this case, I need the PEM files because we're going to put those into the Nordic tools. So that means I also need to program that AT client firmware again. So that is, you can see again, it's in the Nordic SDK under samples, cellular AT client. And we already know that that is built, so we can just flash it. Go back to the directory where I created all of those keys. And the first one that I need is actually not in here. It is the CA certificate. So that if we look at cellular modem CA certificate is what they ask for first. I'm going to take these out so I don't have a problem. And I'm going to change the tag to 24, just what we said we were going to use. I'm just picking that number out of my head. Let's see, what's the easiest way to find the CA certificate? So I think if we look in the build file, build directory, where's the build directory? I erased the build directory. All right, so let's see if I can. Yeah, here we go. All right, so under Golioth source is where this is. So in the Golioth firmware SDK under SRC, there is a file called is.rgrootx1der, which is our CA certificate. So we can use that. I actually need to turn that into a PEM. So I'm using this OpenSSL command right here. You can see that command. And that should CA cert. There we go. All right, so we should be able to cat out our CA cert. Now you're going to want to put these into the key store one at a time. It's just a little bit too much at a time for the device if you do them all at once. Again, check your tags. So I'm putting under security tag 24. And in the serial terminal, we should see an OK at the end of that, which is great. let's delete this out of here, and let's get the CRT, the certificate for the device, and copy that out and put it in the client certificate area right here. And again, over here we see an OK, which is great. And the last thing is the client key. So let's get that file and put it right here. I want to delete this one out, or we'll try to write both of them at once. And I think you might have a buffer overflow when you do that. The device only has so much room. So it says it got that one as well. We can list these out, remember? So now we can see our 12 was what we did for PSK and PSK ID, which are IDs 3 and 4, 4 and 3, I guess. And then IDs 0, 1, and 2 are those CA certificate, the client certificate, and client key, and those are stored under 24. So things are looking really good here. I think we're going to want to go into our Hello directory, and we've already updated all of this stuff before I started making the certificate. So we had auth method cert, and we had our credentials tag as 24. So I think we're ready to build this one. And I did delete the build directory, which you probably don't have to do. So it's going to build the entire world again. But I think we can be patient and wait for that to happen. The only other thing, tip that I have for you on using these tools for dealing with certificates, the certificate manager, the deleting multiple at a time doesn't work. It shows you that it works, but when you read them back out, they're still in there. So you do need to go through and delete one at a time if you're interested in deleting credentials out of there. Just about done building. Now, another interesting thing about this is if we go into our project, we don't have any devices here. So what we did is we gave the public certificate on the certificates here, public root certificate, and that can be used to sign any number of devices that you want, and you just upload this one time, and then when those devices are connecting to Golioth, Golioth will verify that they've been signed with your root key, which you keep secret, and then add them to your project. So let's go ahead and flash this now that it's done building. All right, so we're done building, and let's look at the serial terminal. We should see it coming up onto the cell network here. It got onto the cell network. Now it's going to authenticate with Golioth. Now it is authenticated with Golioth. If we refresh our device list, we see nRF9160, and we are connected. Everything you want with Golioth. It is super cool. So I've just been working with this today. I had worked with it a little bit with the Golioth Zephyr SDK, so we did have it there. But this is a little bit of a new take on it, and I think it makes a lot more sense on how it all works. As you can see, there's a few quirks, which is why I wanted to make the video. But hopefully you were able to follow through all the stuff that I did and have the same success. So that's it for right now, and we'll be back next time with a lot more tips. All right, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.